You're not stuck. You're addicted. Addicted to the safety of being exactly who you've always been. Right now, there's a version of you trying to die. Not metaphorically, psychologically. It's the version that plays small, that chooses comfort over truth, that knows what needs to change, but negotiates with fear instead. And every day you let it survive, you bury the person you're capable of becoming. Carl Jung warned that most people don't live their lives. They live a script written by their unconscious mind, by childhood wounds, by inherited fears, and they call this script fate. But it's not fate, it's refusal. The refusal to do what growth demands, to kill the comfortable version, to force yourself through the psychological death that births the real you. Today, you'll discover why the person you're trying to become is already inside you, just buried under the person you're afraid to stop being. This isn't motivation, it's a blueprint for self-imposed evolution. And if you're ready, it starts with recognizing the invisible prison you've been decorating as freedom. Jung called it the persona, the mask you wear to survive in the world. As a child, you learned quickly which version of yourself got rewarded and which got rejected. So you built a character, the obedient one, the funny one, the responsible one, the one who never causes problems. And over time, that character became so convincing, you forgot it was a performance. But here's what Jung understood that most people never realize. The persona isn't just what you show others, it becomes the prison you live inside. You've spent so long being the version that gets approved, that gets loved, that gets safe passage through life, that you've lost contact with the actual self underneath. And now, years later, you feel hollow. Successful maybe, but hollow. Liked maybe, but not known. Comfortable maybe, but not alive. Look at your own patterns. How many times have you fallen into the same type of relationship? Partners who are emotionally unavailable, who make you prove your worth, who leave you feeling like you're never quite enough. That's not coincidence. That's your unconscious repeating the only script it knows. How many times have you started something with fire, then abandoned it the moment resistance appeared? That's not lack of discipline. That's the old self protecting its territory because change threatens the identity you've spent decades constructing. The invisible chains are the beliefs you don't question. I'm just not a morning person. I'm not good at confrontation. I've never been confident. You say these things like they're facts about your DNA, when they're just stories your child self invented to make sense of pain. A girl gets criticized harshly at 8 years old and decides, I'm not smart enough. 40 years later, she's still declining opportunities, still playing small, still living inside the conclusion an 8-year-old drew. The belief didn't protect her. It imprisoned her. Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Read that again. Everything you think is just how you are. Your tendencies, your limits, your personality, most of it is just unexamined programming running in the background. And the tragedy isn't that you built these patterns. The tragedy is that you're defending them. You call it being authentic. I'm just being myself. But which self? The real one or the one you constructed to survive a world that no longer exists? Here's the test. Ask yourself 3 questions and answer with brutal honesty. First, what do you avoid that you know you shouldn't? Not small things. The big conversation, the career shift, the relationship that's been dead for years. Second, when do you feel most like an imposter? That feeling isn't random, it's the gap between who you actually are and who you're pretending to be. Third, what would you do if no one's opinion of you could change? If your parents, your partner, your friends, if their image of you was locked and unchangeable, what would you do differently tomorrow? Those answers, the ones that came up instantly before you could rationalize them away, those are the bars of your cage. And most people spend their entire lives redecorating that cage. New job, same fear. New city, same patterns. New relationship, same wounds. They mistake motion for growth. They mistake change for transformation. But real evolution, the kind Jung spoke about, doesn't happen by addition. It happens by subtraction, by stripping away every false layer until what remains is undeniable. And that process begins with seeing the chains you've been calling freedom. Jung didn't use gentle language when describing what real transformation requires. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. But to get there, he said you must pass through psychological death. Not a metaphor, not a feeling, an actual dismantling of the ego structure you've built your entire life around. Think of it this way. You can't renovate a building while living in it the same way. At some point, the walls have to come down, and for a period of time you're standing in rubble with no roof over your head, exposed, vulnerable, not knowing if you made a terrible mistake. That moment, that crisis where everything you thought you were dissolves. Jung called it the dark night of the soul. And it's not a malfunction, it's the threshold you must cross. The brain physically resists this process. Neuroscience shows us that your neural pathways are highways carved by repetition. Every time you react the same way, choose the same comfort, avoid the same fear, you deepen those grooves. Your brain loves efficiency. It wants to automate everything so it can conserve energy. So when you try to act differently, think differently, be differently, your nervous system treats it like a threat. It floods you with anxiety, doubt, exhaustion. Not because you're on the wrong path, but because you're leaving the mapped territory. This is why most people abort the transformation right at the crisis point. They start therapy, start journaling, start seeing their patterns clearly. They get excited about change, but then comes the collapse. The moment where their old identity cracks and they don't yet have a new one to replace it. They feel untethered, lost, like they're going insane. Friends and family start asking, "Are you okay? You're acting strange." And in that pressure, most people retreat. They patch up the old identity, convince themselves they were overreacting, and go back to the familiar suffering. But Jung understood something crucial. That dissolution, that feeling of losing yourself, is not the problem. It's the process. Like a caterpillar in a chrysalis, there's a phase where the creature is neither caterpillar nor butterfly. It's literally dissolving into biological soup. If you cut open the chrysalis during that phase, you wouldn't find a partially formed butterfly. You'd find liquid, complete structural breakdown before complete reconstruction. The caterpillar doesn't get wings added to its body. Its body must dissolve for wings to form. Humans go through the same process psychologically. You cannot become the new person by adding habits to the old structure. The old structure must break down. Your certainties must be questioned. Your identities must be surrendered. The career that defined you, the relationship that anchored you, the belief system that guided you, at some point, they must all be put on the table and examined without mercy. Jim Carrey spoke about this after years of being the world's funniest man. He said, "I realized I had spent my whole life trying to make my father laugh, trying to prove I was worthy of love through performance. And when I finally became successful, massively successful, I looked in the mirror and realized I had no idea who I was without the mask." That crisis, that moment of ego death, it wasn't his breakdown. It was his breakthrough. But he had to stand in that empty space long enough to let the real self emerge. Jung warned that you will be tempted to fill that void quickly, to grab a new identity, a new belief system, anything to stop the discomfort of not knowing who you are. But he said the real work is learning to sit in that void, to exist without definition. Because only when you stop clinging to who you were can you discover who you are. Once you've seen the prison and felt the walls crack, what comes next isn't insight, it's war. Jung made it clear that consciousness doesn't sustain itself. It must be fought for every single day across 3 distinct battlefields. War 1. against comfort. Your brain is wired for efficiency, not growth. It wants to conserve energy, repeat patterns, stay in the known. This means that every time you choose discipline over ease, you're fighting your own biology. The alarm goes off at 5 a.m. Your body screams to stay in bed. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system trying to pull you back to homeostasis. The old self isn't gone. It's just waiting for you to slip. Discipline, real discipline, is not punishment. It's the highest form of self-respect. Every time you do what you said you would do, especially when no one's watching, you're sending a message to your psyche. I am not the person who negotiates with comfort anymore. I'm someone who keeps promises to themselves. That signal, repeated daily, rewires your identity at the neurological level. Scientists call it neuroplasticity. Jung would call it forging the individuated self through conscious action. War 2, against false identity. Here's where it gets brutal. When you start to change, when you start setting boundaries, saying no, choosing your path over others' expectations, people will resist. Not because they're bad, but because your evolution threatens the role you played in their story. You were the reliable one who always said yes. The peacemaker who never caused conflict, the supporter who put everyone else first, and now you're disrupting that script. Jung said it plainly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he never promised it would be comfortable. Some people will accuse you of being selfish. Some will say you've changed, and not as a compliment. Some relationships will end, not because of anger, but because they were built on the old version of you, and the new version doesn't fit that foundation anymore. This is the guilt phase. You'll feel like you're betraying people who loved you. But here's the truth Jung understood. You can't betray someone by becoming yourself. The only real betrayal is abandoning your soul to maintain someone else's comfort. If they can't evolve with you, their departure is not a failure. It's proof you're finally choosing truth over approval. War 3, against your own resistance. This is the most dangerous battlefield because the enemy speaks in your voice. It sounds rational. It sounds like self-care. Don't push so hard. Rest today. You've done enough. Is this really necessary? That voice will use therapy language, spiritual language, self-compassion language to keep you small, and you have to learn to recognize it for what it is. The old self fighting for survival. Jung talked about the two wolves inside every person. One represents courage, discipline, growth, action. The other represents fear, comfort, stagnation, excuses. Which one wins? The one you feed, and you feed it through action, not intention. Every morning you stand at a crossroads. You can feed the weak wolf with procrastination, rationalization, and complaint. Or you can feed the strong wolf by doing the hard thing first, before motivation arrives, before you feel ready. The 72-hour rule applies here. When you commit to a new identity, your old self has about 72 hours to talk you out of it. If you can push through that initial resistance 3 days in a row, the new behavior starts to take root. Miss those 3 days, and you're back at the beginning, negotiating with the same voice that's kept you stuck for years. Here's the part no one tells you about transformation. To become who you truly are, you must betray who everyone thinks you are. And that betrayal will feel like violence against yourself. Jung understood this deeply. He called it the process of individuation, separating yourself from the collective unconscious, from the expectations and projections that have been layered onto you since birth. Your parents needed you to be a certain way. Your culture demanded you fit a certain mold. Your friends, your partners, even your own mirror, they all had a version of you they needed you to maintain. And for years, maybe decades, you obliged. You kept the peace. You played the role. You became the person who made everyone comfortable. But now, you're waking up. And the first act of that awakening is disloyalty. Not to people, but to the false image they built around you. And this, Jung warned, is where most people turn back. Because the guilt is crushing, you feel like you're abandoning the people who loved you. But here's what you need to understand. They didn't love you. They loved the function you served, the version of you that asked for nothing, that absorbed their chaos, that made them feel good about themselves. Real love doesn't demand you stay small. Real love celebrates your expansion, and anyone who resents your growth was never invested in your wholeness. They were invested in your usefulness. Think about the person who's always been the caretaker in their family. The one who answers every call, solves every problem, sacrifices their own needs to keep everyone else stable. Then one day, they start saying no. I can't take that call right now. I can't solve that problem for you. I need to focus on my own life. And suddenly, they're labeled selfish, ungrateful, cold. The family system that depended on their self-abandonment goes into crisis. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because they're disrupting a dysfunctional equilibrium. Jung called this necessary solitude. There's a phase in every transformation where you must stand alone. Not forever, but long enough to remember who you are without an audience. Long enough to hear your own voice without the chorus of others' expectations drowning it out. And yes, it will be lonely. Yes, you will doubt yourself. Yes, you will wonder if you're making a mistake. But that discomfort is not a sign you're on the wrong path. It's the labor pain of birthing your authentic self. The grief is real, though. You are losing something. Not the people necessarily, but the version of yourself they knew. The version that bent, that accommodated, that disappeared into others' needs. You have to let that version die. And like any death, there's a funeral. There's a mourning period. You can honor what that version did for you, how it protected you when you were too young or too scared to stand on your own. But you cannot let it steer your life anymore. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because acceptance means seeing both the light and shadow, the strength and weakness, and still choosing to move forward. It means no longer hiding behind the mask of who you should be and standing fully in the truth of who you are, even if that truth makes others uncomfortable, even if it costs you relationships, even if it means walking a path no one in your lineage has walked before. This betrayal is not cruelty. It's consciousness, and consciousness, Jung believed, is the only thing that makes a human life worth living. You can respect the person you used to be. You can be grateful for how they helped you survive. But if you stay loyal to that old version out of guilt or fear, you're not being kind. You're committing the ultimate betrayal, the one against your own soul. Here's the hardest truth about transformation. The moment you become the new person, the war doesn't end. It intensifies, because now you have something to lose. Now you know what it feels like to live consciously, and the pull back to unconsciousness becomes more seductive than ever. Jung warned that consciousness is not a permanent state. It's not something you achieve once and keep forever. It must be earned again every single morning. The unconscious is always there, waiting in the background, pulling you back toward the familiar patterns, the old neural highways, the comfortable prison. And if you stop fighting, even for a week, you'll wake up one day and realize you've slipped back without noticing. This is what Jung called the eternal return to the shadow. You think you've integrated it, understood it, transcended it. Then life delivers a crisis, a loss, a rejection, a failure, and suddenly you're reacting exactly like the old version. Defensive, avoidant, small. Not because you failed, but because you stopped maintaining consciousness. You stopped doing the daily work of staying awake. Think of it like this. An alcoholic who's been sober for 5 years isn't cured. They're in active recovery. Every day they choose sobriety is a day they win. But the addiction isn't dead. It's dormant. And one moment of weakness, one rationalization, one just this once, and they're back in the cycle. Personal evolution works the same way. The old self isn't dead, it's just not in control, but it's always one compromise away from reclaiming the throne. Jung used the metaphor of alchemy. The alchemist believed you had to refine gold through fire again and again. Not once, repeatedly. Each time removing more impurities until what remained was pure. He saw human consciousness the same way. You don't have one breakthrough and you're done. You have 1,000 small breakthroughs, 1,000 moments where you catch yourself falling into old patterns and consciously choose different. 1,000 mornings where you force yourself to act like the person you're becoming before you feel like that person. The mature individual, in Jung's view, is not someone who's resolved all their contradictions. It's someone who can live with contradiction without being destroyed by it. You can feel fear and still act with courage. You can feel doubt and still move forward with commitment. You can feel the pull of comfort and still choose the path of growth. That's not hypocrisy. That's wholeness. The ability to hold opposing forces inside you without letting either one dominate. So what does this look like practically? It's the daily audit. Every evening, before you sleep, ask yourself one question. Did I live today as the person I'm becoming, or did I slide back into the person I was? And answer honestly. Not to punish yourself, but to stay conscious, because the moment you stop paying attention, the unconscious takes over. It's the morning ritual. Before you touch your phone, before you check messages, before you enter the chaos of the world, you do one thing that affirms your new identity. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's the hard workout. Whatever it is, it's the signal to your psyche. I am still choosing consciousness. I am still fighting. And it's the midday checkpoint. When you feel yourself slipping, when the old voice starts rationalizing, when comfort starts looking more appealing than growth, you pause, you recognize what's happening, and you make the conscious choice again. Jung said it clearly. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. And the pain doesn't stop after the first awakening. It becomes the permanent condition of the conscious life. Not suffering for suffering's sake, but the discomfort of staying awake in a world that rewards sleep. That's maturity. Not peace, but the strength to endure the ongoing war. This isn't a motivational video. It's a warning and an invitation. A warning that if you do nothing with what you've heard, you'll return to the same patterns within 72 hours. The unconscious will reclaim its territory. The old self will whisper its reasonable explanations, and you'll convince yourself that awareness is enough. It's not. Jung didn't write about consciousness to make people feel enlightened. He wrote about it because he knew that without action, insight is just entertainment. So here's the protocol. Not theory, not philosophy. The actual practice of forced evolution every morning before anything else. One identity-affirming action. Not something that feels good, something that proves to yourself who you're becoming. You said you're disciplined. Then do the hard thing first, before motivation shows up, before you feel ready. The cold shower, the workout, the deep work session. Whatever terrifies the old version of you, that's what you do. Not because it's noble, but because it's the declaration, I'm not that person anymore. Midday. The conscious choice checkpoint. Set an alarm. When it goes off, ask yourself, am I acting right now as the person I'm becoming, or am I sliding back into comfort? Then make one micro adjustment, one conversation you've been avoiding, one boundary you need to set, one distraction you need to eliminate. Consciousness is built in these small moments, not grand gestures. Every evening, the honest audit. 3 questions. What promise did I keep to myself today? Where did I compromise? What specific action will I take tomorrow to correct it? Write it down, not to shame yourself, but to stay awake. Because the moment you stop tracking, the unconscious takes over. And understand this clearly, the war never ends. You don't arrive at some final version of yourself and coast. Jung spent his entire life studying the psyche, and even he said he was still integrating his shadow at 70. Maturity is not a destination. It's the willingness to keep fighting when no one's watching, when no one's applauding, when there's no reward except the integrity of staying true to the person you decided to become. The goal isn't peace. Jung never promised peace. The goal is consciousness, the ability to see yourself clearly, to act with intention, to live deliberately instead of being lived by forces you don't understand. And yes, it's painful. Yes, it's lonely sometimes. Yes, you'll question if it's worth it, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is spending your entire life as a passenger in your own existence, calling it fate when it's just refusal. So if you've recognized yourself in this, if something inside you stirred, here's what I need you to do. Comment below one specific habit you're killing this week to make room for who you're becoming. Not a vague intention, a specific action, because the moment you declare it publicly, you've created accountability, and accountability is how the new self survives when motivation dies. The blueprint is here. The choice is yours. Don't waste it on another cycle of insight without action. Force yourself forward. The version of you that's trying to be born is worth the fight.